In the sprawling mansions of an elite southern enclave, where wealth flowed like endless rivers and old prejudices lingered in the shadows, a young boy named Ethan lived in perpetual darkness. Born blind to a millionaire father whose empire was built on factories that exploited underpaid workers, many of them people of color, Ethan's world was one of isolation. His family, steeped in the privileges of their lineage, viewed the world through a lens of superiority, whispering slurs behind closed doors and enforcing invisible barriers that kept others at arm's length. Yet, amidst this opulent cage, there was Rosa, the black maid who had served the household for decades. She moved through the home like a quiet force, her hands calloused from years of labor, her spirit unbroken despite the constant undercurrents of disdain from Ethan's parents. Ethan, now a teenager, navigated his sightless existence with a cane and an acute sense of hearing that picked up the unspoken tensions around him. He felt the chill in his father's voice when addressing Rosa, the way his mother would demand extra chores as if to remind her of her place. But Rosa was more than a servant to Ethan. She was the warmth in his cold world, guiding him through the gardens with stories of her own life, tales laced with the sting of injustice that she never fully revealed. One fateful afternoon, as storm clouds gathered outside the estate's towering windows, Ethan collapsed in agony, his head throbbing with a pain that doctors had long dismissed as untreatable. In desperation, Rosa knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she gently rubbed his eyes with a cloth soaked in a mysterious herbal mixture passed down from her ancestors. What happened next defied all logic, shattering the boundaries of medicine and prejudice alike. Something impossible stirred within Ethan, a spark that would expose the family's hidden shame and force a reckoning with the racism that had blinded them all. The air thickened with anticipation, as if the universe itself held its breath, waiting for the veil to lift. The Harrington estate stood as a monument to inherited fortune in the heart of Georgia, where old money mingled with older biases. Alexander Harrington, Ethan's father, had amassed his millions through textile mills that dotted the countryside, mills where black and immigrant workers toiled under grueling conditions for wages that barely sustained them. Alexander prided himself on his traditional values, a euphemism for the racist ideologies he inherited from his forebears. He often boasted at dinner parties about how his family had built this country, conveniently omitting the backs they had broken in the process. His wife, Victoria, shared his views, her social circle an echo chamber of exclusion where charity galas masked their disdain for those unlike themselves. Ethan, their only child, entered the world under a cloud of misfortune. Born prematurely with congenital blindness due to a rare genetic condition, he became both a source of quiet embarrassment and a symbol of their fragile perfection. Doctors in the city's finest hospitals shook their heads, prescribing experimental treatments that yielded nothing but bills. Alexander viewed his son's disability as a flaw in the family line, something to be managed discreetly, while Victoria doted superficially, her affection laced with pity that bordered on resentment. They hired tutors and specialists, but the daily care fell to Rosa, a woman in her 50s whose family had roots in the same soil that Alexander's ancestors had claimed through exploitation. Rosa had come to the Harringtons 20 years earlier, fleeing economic hardship in a nearby town ravaged by discriminatory policies that favored white-owned businesses. She endured the subtle barbs, the way Alexander would count the silverware after she cleaned, or Victoria's insistence on separate entrances for help. Yet, Rosa's resilience shone through in her quiet dignity. She sang old spirituals while scrubbing floors, her voice a balm that Ethan gravitated toward from infancy. As he grew, Ethan formed a bond with her that transcended his blindness. She described the world to him in vivid detail: the crimson roses in the garden, the way sunlight danced on the lake, the faces of people passing by. Through her, he learned fragments of a broader reality, the struggles of her community, the marches for equality she had witnessed as a child, the quiet acts of resistance against systemic oppression. Curiosity brewed in Ethan's mind like a slow storm. Why did his parents' tones shift when speaking to Rosa? Why did she hesitate when he asked about her own family? mentioning only in passing the brother lost to unjust incarceration or the neighborhood redlined into poverty. The family's racism manifested in small cruelties, denying Rosa time off for holidays, underpaying her despite her loyalty, and isolating her from guests as if she were invisible. Ethan, sensing these injustices through the timbre of voices and the weight of silences, began to question the world he couldn't see. His blindness, once a mere physical barrier, started to symbolize something deeper, the willful ignorance that plagued his household. As years passed, Ethan's headaches worsened, a mystery the specialists attributed to stress, but Rosa suspected otherwise, drawing on folk wisdom from her heritage. The stage was set for a confrontation, where the lines between physical sight and moral vision would blur, pulling the family toward an unavoidable truth. As Ethan's teenage years unfolded, the Harrington household became a pressure cooker of unspoken tensions, where racial injustice simmered beneath the surface of polished marble and crystal chandeliers. Alexander's business dealings grew more aggressive, acquiring land in predominantly black neighborhoods through predatory loans and eminent domain tactics that displaced families who had lived there for generations. He justified it as progress, but Rosa knew better. She had seen similar patterns in her youth when white developers carved up her community, leaving scars that never healed. At home, these attitudes translated into daily microaggressions. Alexander would mutter about lazy workers when Rosa took a moment to rest, implying her race made her unreliable while Victoria enforced arbitrary rules, like forbidding Rosa from using the family bathroom, reinforcing a hierarchy rooted in segregation's legacy. Ethan, confined to his darkened world, became increasingly attuned to these dynamics. His acute hearing captured the disdain in his father's commands, the way "girl" slipped from Victoria's lips when addressing Rosa, a diminutive that belied her age and experience. Rosa, ever patient, absorbed these slights, channeling her energy into caring for Ethan. She would guide him through the estate's vast library, her fingers tracing Braille books while she wove in oral histories of civil rights heroes, figures like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., whose names she whispered as if they were sacred. Through these sessions, Ethan began to piece together the puzzle of inequality. He learned of redlining that trapped black families in underfunded schools, of police brutality that claimed innocent lives, and of workplace discrimination that kept people like Rosa in perpetual servitude. These stories built a fire in him, a curiosity that clashed with his parents' worldview. Tension escalated when Alexander hosted a gala for his business associates, a lavish affair where champagne flowed and deals were struck amid laughter tinged with bigotry. Rosa was tasked with serving, her uniform a stark reminder of her status. Overhearing slurs tossed casually about those people in the inner cities, Ethan felt a knot of anger form in his chest. Later that night, he confronted his father in the study, his voice trembling as he asked why Rosa wasn't treated as family after all her years of service. Alexander dismissed him with a laugh, claiming it was just how things are, and warned Ethan not to meddle in adult matters. This exchange deepened Ethan's isolation, his blindness now a metaphor for the family's refusal to see the humanity in others. As months passed, Ethan's health deteriorated. Migraines plagued him, visions of light flickering in his mind like distant stars. Hallucinations, the doctors said. Rosa, drawing on remedies from her grandmother, a healer in the rural South, prepared poultices and teas infused with herbs like eyebright and chamomile. Traditions born from necessity in communities denied access to quality health care due to racial barriers. She applied them secretly, fearing reprisal, while sharing more about her past, the Jim Crow laws that forced her family to drink from separate fountains, the voting suppression that silenced their voices, the economic boycotts that crippled black-owned businesses. These revelations heightened the emotional stakes as Ethan grappled with guilt over his privilege. The injustice peaked when Victoria discovered Rosa using family ingredients for Ethan's treatments. Accusing her of theft and voodoo nonsense, Victoria threatened to fire her, echoing the historical dismissal of black knowledge as inferior. Alexander supported this, citing security concerns, a code for racial mistrust. Ethan, overhearing the argument, pleaded on Rosa's behalf, but his words fell on deaf ears. The family hired a white nurse as a replacement, one who treated Ethan with clinical detachment, lacking Rosa's warmth. Banished to the servants' quarters, Rosa continued to sneak visits, her bond with Ethan unbreakable. The tension mounted as Ethan's condition worsened, his world shrinking to pain and despair. Whispers of a family secret emerged. Rumors that Alexander's Mills had exposed workers to toxins, perhaps even contributing to Ethan's blindness through environmental racism, as polluted runoff affected nearby communities disproportionately. In this rising storm, Ethan's empathy